PMQs again. Christ. Okay, let's get into it. Now we're starting before the Prime Minister comes in, and it's purely because I want to show this particular sack of human excrement, because Conservatives lie, and annoyingly in Parliament they don't get called out for it when they do it consistently. Let's take a look, eh?
Individuals who've been affected by the COVID pandemic, and of course the Welsh Government also have tax-raising powers. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that this government has spent hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds supporting businesses and individuals throughout this country. Such is our commitment to ensuring that nobody is left out as a result of the impact of this terrible pandemic.
Mega wealthy.
No.
Let's answer the Shadow Secretary of State with the first of two questions. Dear Griffith.
They've not supported the people that often.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last year has been immensely challenging for many Welsh families who've seen their lives completely upended by the virus. Now, despite welcome progress on vaccinations, the pandemic's not going away overnight, and many still feel grave uncertainty about the future of their jobs and their family finances. So can I ask the Minister, why does his government think that now is the time to cut universal credit by £1,000 a year, hitting over 200,000 Welsh families who are doing their best to get by?
Just want to add to that, it's not just that they want to cut it to Welsh people, it's that they want to cut it for everyone who's on it.
Mr. Speaker, I have not yet been promoted to the Treasury, and I can't possibly predict what might happen in the budget that may or may not come in a few months' time. Perhaps the Honourable Lady knows something that the rest of us don't. But I can say to the Honourable Lady that this government have been steadfast in their commitment to supporting all those who have been left out. And may I just point out that we will come through this crisis quickly as a result of the government's wise decision not to take part in the European Union vaccination scheme, which is why we have now vaccinated 14% of the population of the United Kingdom.
Okay, that right there is why I wanted to start with this, because we've not vaccinated 40% of the UK population. If we were part of the European vaccination scheme, it wouldn't stop us from doing anything that we've already done, because everything that we set into motion with the vaccines today, that all started when we were still part of the EU. The EU doesn't tell people what it can and can't do. It sets a standard and says, you can't fall below this standard. Now, in far as terms of human rights, yeah, countries often do, and under Conservative governments, we absolutely always did. But circling back to that 40%, that is absolute bullshit. See, I'm part of what they would class as that 40%. I've had my first of 2 jabs, but I've only had my first of 2 jabs. So I am not vaccinated, yet I'm counted as vaccinated. This is one of those lies that will reach to the Conservative base. It will reach to the people who aren't paying attention. It will reach to the people who just don't really care about reality. And unfortunately, because the government's approach to vaccinations, especially its contradictory approach to what the scientists have actually said, we have the South African variant, which we believe is more vaccine resistant. That's in the UK because this government didn't want to close its borders. Wasn't there like a whole big thing with Brexit, this government and closing borders? Am I missing something with that? And also we have, what is it being dubbed? The Kent variant, where it spreads so much because, again, every single time the scientific and medical advisors put their advice forward and said to the government, guys, you really need to be doing this, the government ignored them.
Go back to Neil Griffith. Neil Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, anyone who took the initiative and started their own business within a year of the pandemic hitting was completely shut out of the self-employed support scheme when it was announced last March. Many turned to universal credit as their only option. Now, nearly a year on, and with last year's tax returns submitted to HMRC, will the government think again, close the gaps in support, and give the newly self-employed the help that they deserve?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady knows very well that I'm not responsible for the policies of the Treasury, but I can simply point to the fact that we have provided over £9.3 billion of additional support through the welfare system for people affected by COVID, including the £20 a week increase to the Universal Credit Standard Allowance. The government's commitment to supporting all those who have been affected by this pandemic is very, very clear to all.
Okay, yeah, £20 increase on universal credit doesn't make universal credit better. Universal credit has always been shit. Universal credit, as I've spoken about on this channel before, and as JS UK News has spoken about on his channel before, it has pushed people into suicide. It has murdered people across the country. If you're unlucky enough to fall on universal credits, you're pretty much fucked. So the fact that they threw in an extra 20 quid is insulting at best. But here's the thing. This fuckknuckle could have very easily said, I'm not part of the Treasury, I don't decide Treasury policies, so I just can't comment. That would have been absolutely fine. But he acted like a little weasel. He acted repulsively. Said, no, we don't do nothing wrong. Okay, I'm starting just before Keir Starmer. Theresa May just got up. Let's see. Let's go through it.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I join the whole House in paying tribute to Captain Sir Tom Moore, who was indeed an inspiration to all of us and a beacon of light at a time of darkness and a true gentleman. Okay,
I'm going to pause it right there. Okay, so Captain Sir Tom Moore. He raised a lot of awareness and he raised a lot of money. Now, the thing that angered me at the time is that he shouldn't have had to have done such things that he did. He shouldn't have had to have walked around his garden to rally support, because the government should have given the NHS everything they fucking needed from the get-go. But they didn't. He shouldn't have had to have raised money to give nurses and doctors and attendants and the on-call staff PPE. He shouldn't have had to have done this, but he did, because consistently this government pisses on the people. They take public money, whether it's from the NHS or whether it's just from the coffers itself, and they give it to their fucking mates. Captain Tom Moore was a brilliant man. He shouldn't have had to have done the things that he had to do in his twilight years, because this government not only failed him, but spat in the face of the country during a global pandemic.
I'm sure my right honourable friend is aware that my 10-minute rule bill would increase the maximum penalty for death by dangerous driving to life imprisonment. The policy and the bill have cross-party support. The policy has government support, the bill does not. The government says it will introduce the policy in its sentencing bill, of which we have seen, as yet, no sign. So will the government now give government time to my bill to ensure this necessary change is put on the statute book as soon as possible?
Prime Minister.
Yeah. I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, and she's absolutely right to campaign for punishments that fit the crime, and we're therefore bringing forward exactly those changes, Mr. Speaker, and in our forthcoming sentencing bill, and our proposals, I believe, will go as far, if not even further, than those that she wants, by raising the maximum penalty for causing death by careless driving when under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and they will tighten the law for those who cause serious injury by careless driving.
Now comes the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join you and the Prime Minister in sending my condolences to the family of Captain Sir Tom Moore? He, perhaps more than anyone, embodied the spirit of Britain, and he will be sadly missed. And I welcome the initiative that the Prime Minister spoke of a clap this evening.
We have a government for
Mr.
a
Speaker,
reason.
our thoughts are also with the family
Fuck
of
the
Maureen
people.
Colquhoun, the first openly lesbian MP and a great champion of women's rights. Mr. Speaker, let me pay tribute to our NHS and all of those on the front line who are delivering the vaccine. Today we're likely to hit 10 million vaccinations, which is remarkable. The biggest risk to the vaccine programme at the moment is the arrival of new variants, such as the South African variant. On that issue, the government's own scientist, Sage, said 2 weeks ago, and I quote, "Only a complete preemptive closure of borders or the mandatory quarantine of all visitors upon arrival can get close to fully preventing new cases or new variants." So pretty clear. So why did the Prime Minister choose not to do the one thing that Sage said could prevent new variants coming to the United Kingdom?
Prime Minister.
Well, actually, Mr. Speaker, Sage did not recommend a complete ban, and they say that travel bans should not be relied upon to stop importation of new variants. But we do have, Mr. Speaker, one of the toughest regimes in the world. Anybody coming from South Africa not only has to do a test before they come here.
No, we don't. We have no border whatsoever. We don't, which is amazing, because this is not just a Conservative government. This is a Conservative, harsh, hardline Brexiteer government that stood on the values of isolationism, that stood on closing the borders to migrant workers and asylum seekers and refugees coming into the country. But they will not close the border when it comes to people just travelling in. Amazing. They've spent little decades saying we need to close the border, especially this scumbag. Nope. Even Priti Patel, one of the most racist, anti-British, disgusting people you could possibly imagine in Parliament, aside from Boris Johnson, who literally went up to a black woman in a party and made monkey noises. Even she said the borders want to be shut. Or at least now she's reporting that she said the borders, she wanted to shut the borders. But even then, we don't have that, because New Zealand, Germany, in fact most of Europe closed off their borders. And this is so remarkably stupid. Yes, if you come from South Africa, you might have to take a test. But if you go from South Africa to somewhere else, and then that's somewhere else to the UK, you're fine.
But anybody coming from South Africa now, British citizens returning from South Africa now, will find themselves obliged to go into quarantine for 10 days.
Only if it's direct.
They will have an isolations assurance agency checking up on them, and it is illegal now, Mr. Speaker, to go on holiday in this country. It is illegal to travel from South Africa or all the countries on the current red list. And we will be going forward, Mr. Speaker, with a plan to ensure that people coming into this country from those red list countries immediately have to go into government-mandated quarantine hospitality.
Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I'm intrigued by the Prime Minister's answer. I don't think he disputes what Sage's view was, that only a complete closure or comprehensive quarantine of all arrivals will work. He doesn't seem to dispute that. He says it simply wasn't a recommendation. I would ask the Prime Minister to publish the full Sage minutes so that we can see what was said in full, or if there's some other advice, perhaps publish
his
that.
Head?
Because the
it's almost like he knows he lied and just doesn't want people to call him on it.
Across England, and measures are in place to try to deal with that. We also know that other variants are out there in other parts of the world. So is the Prime Minister really saying, just as a matter of common sense, is he saying that quarantining all arrivals would make no difference to fighting new variants of the virus? Or is he saying that quarantining all arrivals at the border would make a difference, but it's too difficult to do it?
Mr. Speaker, this is the right honourable gentleman who only recently said that quarantine measures were a blunt instrument, and whose Shadow Transport Secretary said that quarantine should be lessened. We have one of the toughest regimes in the world, and I think when he calls for a complete closure of borders, or suggests that might be an option, Mr. Speaker, he should be aware that 75% of our medicines come into this country from the European continent, 45% of our food. 250,000 businesses in this country rely on imports. It is not practical completely to close off this country, as he seems to be suggesting. What is practical to do is have one of the toughest regimes in the world, and to get on with vaccinating the people of this country, which is what we are doing, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Starmer.
Okay, so essentially what he said, what Boris just said to that question, and the question was essentially, we need to close things. Is it too difficult, or is it just not practical? What he said essentially was, yeah, we can't do either. Yeah, we can't do either. Because even though we've spent years saying that we don't need the EU in any way, shape or form, we get a lot of medication from the EU, and we're already starting to see the negative side effects with delays in that. We get food from the EU, and we're already starting to see delays in that. We just can't do it. Amazing.
Mr. Speaker, what he says about the Labour position is complete nonsense. He knows it. It's the 3rd of February 2021. We've new variants in the country, our schools are shut, and our borders are open. Everybody knows there are exceptions, whatever the quarantine regime. Everybody knows that. And that's not what this question is about. The position is this: 21,000 people are coming into this country every day. The Prime Minister's new border arrangements are still weeks away from being implemented and will only affect direct flights from some countries. We know from the first wave of the pandemic that only 0.1% of virus cases came from China, where we had restrictions, whereas 62% came indirectly from France and Spain, where there were no restrictions. Why does the Prime Minister think that the variants of the virus will behave differently and only arrive in the UK by direct flights?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he can't have it both ways. He simultaneously says that he wants the borders to be kept open for freight reasons, or to allow businesses to carry on. I think that was what he was saying, whilst calling for tougher quarantine measures, which is exactly what this government imposed as soon as we became aware of the new variant. Mr.
Okay, so whenever Boris says, I think that's what he's saying, essentially he's saying, I'm too dumb to actually follow, so I'm going to take the last few words. But no, actually you can have it both ways. You can shut down the borders while still allowing freights and industry to move. Because we don't need to be taking people who are coming here for holidays. But we need to get food in. There's a difference. We can take people in who are coming home. We don't need to take people who are coming in to see meetings or football games or shit like that. And one of the biggest problems that we've seen is that this government is, it spouts that BS of all or nothing. Either we'll have no restrictions at all, or we'll just pretend that we have them, and the harshest in the world, when that's just not the case. So no, we can stop travel for shits and giggles. Okay, there's no reason why we should have an open policy to people who are traveling from different countries to come here, unless it's specifically for work. And we saw this last year when we had a little bit of an issue with the farms. Remember that? No one was picking the food from the farms, so they imported. They brought in a ton of people from Romania because English people weren't doing it. Bit embarrassing, but twat.
the Speaker, and as I repeat what you have to do. If you want to come into this country from abroad, you have to, 72 hours before you fly, you have to get a test, Mr. Speaker. You have to have a passenger locator form. You're kicked off the plane if you don't have...
No. You do it if you come direct from South Africa, but you can go to other countries and then fly direct in. No one is actually forcing people to do these tests. That's not happening. It's not happening. So again, Boris Johnson lying yet again.
You then have to spend 10 days, Mr. Speaker, in quarantine. If you come from one of the red list countries, Mr. Speaker, you have to go straight into quarantine. And all this, of course, is to allow us to get on with the vaccination programme. And if it had listened to the right honourable gentleman, Mr. Speaker, we would still be at the starting blocks, because he wanted to stay in the European Medicines Agency, Mr. Speaker, and said so 4 times from that dispatch box.
Let's stop right there. Being part of the European med scheme would not affect anything. And I caught a clip, I read a clip of what Starmer is about to say. He's about to fuck up majorly. But here's the thing, we started our vaccination process while we were still in that European medical scheme. It has no effect whatsoever. And as I said at the very start of this video, the European Union doesn't tell people what to do. This is the bar, and it says you can't fall below it. That's it. So us starting our vaccination process, which is, that's not falling below the bar. And as a side note, every time we've fallen below that bar, yeah, nothing's happened. It doesn't happen. Just it doesn't. But again, this is Boris Johnson lying, and it's purely to resonate with his own base.
Nonsense. Don't let the truth get in the way of a pre-prepared gag. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows I've never said that from this dispatch box or anywhere else, but the truth escapes him. Mr. Speaker, he described the current arrangements. If they were working, the variant wouldn't be in the country, the single biggest threat to the vaccine system. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to another area where the government's been slow to act, the cladding crisis. This is affecting millions of people, and I can't tell the Prime Minister how anxious and angry people feel about this. It's now 3.5 years since the Grenfell tragedy, which took 72 lives. So can the Prime Minister tell the House and the country why, 3.5 years on, are there still hundreds of thousands of people living in homes with unsafe cladding? 3.5 years on, and why are millions of leaseholders in homes that they can't sell and facing extortionate costs?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in respect of the Honourable Gentleman's last answer, may I advise him to consult YouTube, where he will find an answer. He raises a very important point about cladding and the predicament of some leaseholders, of many leaseholders, and he's absolutely right, Mr. Speaker. This is a problem that needs to be fixed. This government is getting on with it. 95% of the high-rise buildings with unsafe ACM cladding have been, work is either underway, they are either complete or underway to remove that cladding, Mr. Speaker. I very much appreciate and sympathise with the predicament of leaseholders who are in that situation, but we are working to clear the backlog, and I can tell him that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor and the Community Secretary will be coming forward with a full package to address the issue.
Mr. Speaker, whatever the Prime Minister claims being done isn't working. Because this is the situation. Through no fault of their own, huge numbers of people, especially leaseholders, are stuck in the middle. They are living in unsafe homes. They can't sell, and they're being asked to foot the bill. That's the situation that they are in. Take, for example, Will Martin. He's a doctor who's got a flat in Sheffield. He's been spending his days on the front line fighting COVID in the NHS. He spends his nights worrying about the £52,000 bill that he now has to pay for fire safety repairs. He doesn't want future promises, Prime Minister. He doesn't want to hear that it's all been sorted when he knows that it hasn't. He wants to know here and now, will he or will he not have to pay that £52,000 bill?
Mr. Speaker, we're determined that no leaseholder should have to pay for the unaffordable costs of fixing safety defects that they didn't cause under no fault of their own. And that's why, in addition to the 1.6 billion we're putting in to remove the ACM and the UPL cladding, we are also setting up and have set up a £1 billion building safety fund, which has already processed over almost 3,000 claims. And I sympathise very much with the gentleman Dr. Martin, that he mentions, and I hope very much that his particular case can be addressed in the course of the forthcoming package that will be produced by my right honourable friends.
There are thousands and thousands of people in exactly the same position. I spoke to leaseholders caught in the middle of this on Monday. One of them was Hayley. She's already gone bankrupt, Mr. Prime Minister. She's 27. She bought a flat, she's lost it, she's now bankrupt. It's too late for her. Those leaseholders that I spoke to had three very simple asks. This is what they want: immediate upfront funding for unsafe blocks, a deadline of next year to make buildings safe, and protection for leaseholders. We put those forward for a vote on Monday. The Prime Minister says he's determined to do something about it. What did he do? He ordered his MPs to abstain. If the Prime Minister is serious about moving this forward and ending this injustice, will he commit today to those simple asks from leaseholders?
Mr. Speaker, we're getting on with the job of helping leaseholders across the country by remediating their buildings.
Wow.
And in addition to the funds I've already mentioned, I can tell him that we're also introducing a £30 million fund to install alarms and other interim measures. And we're making it very clear to the mortgage industry that they should be supporting people living in such accommodation, and and making it clear to all sectors of the industry that people living in such homes should not be tied up in the whole EWS1 process, and that will benefit about 450,000 homeowners, Mr. Speaker. I think he's right to raise the problem, but we're getting on with addressing it, Mr. Speaker. And we're getting on with addressing the fundamental problem that afflicts this country, and that is the COVID pandemic. And that's why I'm pleased that we've now done 10 million first vaccinations across the country. And I repeat, Mr. Speaker, had we listened to the right honourable gentleman, we would be stuck at go, because he's shaking his head, but he can check the record. Several times he said that this country should remain in the European Medicines Agency.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there. Yeah, he did say that. He did. But here's the thing, and I had this conversation with a colleague at work. There is no part of me that doubts that Starmer would have actually listened and acted on the advice that the medical advisors and scientific advisors, this age group, gave when they gave it. So this notion, again, it's back to the old Conservative playbook. Yes, I know we burnt down your home and punched your children in the throat. I know we did all these horrible things, but stick with us, because, well, the others would have done worse. And every time Starmer or anyone from the left wing points out how badly things have got, they're dubbed with Captain Hindsight. It's not hindsight if you're told on the Monday that by Friday something is going to happen, and then 3 weeks later, when it's all gone to shit and the house is burnt down, someone points out, why didn't you listen to the person who gave you the advice a few weeks ago? That's not hindsight. That's listening to someone who knows what they're talking about. But the Conservatives don't do it. This government has never done it. They're not listening to the scientific advice. And when they do finally act on it, it is far, far too late. Essentially, it's a small bin that's just started to catch on fire. You've got to act quickly, otherwise the whole place is going to burn down. And not once has the Conservatives dealt with the small fire in the bin. Not once. They've always waited until the fire is spread to the rest of the house.
On a point of order to correct me, because he said it was wrong just now. I think he should study the record and he'll find that is exactly what he did. We want to get this country safe again. We want schools to come back. Mr. Speaker, he continues to refuse to say that schools aren't safe, Mr. Speaker. And on the contrary, he spends his time looking at Labour focus groups who tell him that he should stop sitting on the fence.
And Prime Minister,
Mr. Speaker, can I?
No, Prime Minister. Just in fairness, I think we've got to be somewhere near the question that was asked, and I don't want you to go around the world answering every problem and issue. There's a lot more questions who's going to allow you to do that, and the first one's going, Marco Longi.
All right, I'm going to stop there because I've got a few thoughts anyway. So, the cladding. Okay, cladding is a serious problem. I get that's affected a lot of people. But unfortunately, most people in the country aren't going to care about that. They do care about the death toll. They do care about people dying on the streets. They do care about what they can see in front of them. So I want to know why Keir Starmer didn't bring up the fact that vaccines have been destroyed because they can't be used. And what I mean by that is there are so many people who couldn't go for their second or even their first dose because they live just too far away from these medical centres. NHS staff could use those doses as their second dose, and yet they were destroyed instead of being used. I want to remind people, we didn't just pay for these doses, we paid a lot for these doses. We paid more than other countries have paid for these doses. And now we just wasted them. I've said in other videos, I'm not particularly fussed about how much money you spend on something as long as it actually saves a life and we can show that it saves a life. But this kind of stupidity, because there are two problems with what this does. It encourages variants of the virus to emerge that are resistant to any vaccines, because you're going longer without getting that second dose than what is actually needed. And again, this is something that the Conservatives are pushing. No, you can go a few more weeks, you can go a couple more months. That's not what the scientists are saying. And then the second thing of that is it's wasteful. Now, there are people out there who just don't care about human lives and they only care about the money. Okay, well, we just wasted a shit ton of vaccines. So today was weak, or yesterday was weak, as it's Thursday morning when I'm doing this. It was very weak from Starmer. I think he started off good, but I think he should have hammered home on the vaccines. I think he should have hammered home on the fact that care homes who have had their first jabs have seen outbreaks, like the care home I work in, like the care home a friend of mine works in. He should have hammered home on a lot of different topics, and instead he went into cladding, and he gave the Conservatives an open wound. Because here's the thing, okay? Conservatives lie. I showed the bit at the very start of this video. Conservatives lie. And by and large, the media doesn't care, because by and large, the media is owned by right-wing Conservatives. But if a left-winger lies, it's done. It's over. That'll be everywhere. It'll be everywhere. Starmer lied. Now, to my knowledge, he's already corrected the record, because everything politicians say, just like their voting record, everything they say in Parliament is a matter of public record. As far as I know, he's already corrected that, but it's not going to help going forward. And I think he focused on the wrong thing towards the end of those questions for this one. But there you go. If you like the new setup, let me know. If you like this incredibly loud t-shirt, you can get it at tailwind.tmail.com. All proceeds are going to charity. We're going to Feed in Britain for this year. Take care. I'll see you next time.